can't let this first lesson pass by without comment. It's one of those things that's very important to us, I think, as disciples. This reading from the book of Kings. First of all, there's a red flag that goes up when you hear anything that says anything about a mountain. That red flag says, look out, God's coming. Anything in the Old Testament that has a mountain in it, we call them high places. High places are where God meets people, where there's expected a divine encounter. You see it all the time. You heard about Moses in the Episcopal lesson. Where did Moses meet God? Well, it was on a mountain. Mount Sinai. We hear all the time about Mount Zion. Mount Zion is the high place in Jerusalem where the temple is built. It's a high place, a sacred place where the temple is a sacred place even to this very day. But Horeb, that's one we don't hear too much about. Well, partly because of what we call the lost tribes of Israel, the ones that fell away from the Lord. That's part of what that story is about today. But we do hear about it in the New Testament. We hear about it in the story of the Samaritan woman. When the Samaritan woman is arguing with Jesus, she said to him, after all, well, yes, you Jews, you think you have to go down to Jerusalem, to Mount Zion, to worship. We and our people have been worshiping here on Mount Horeb all these many years, all these many generations here with our father Jacob. So it's a holy place. And there's the prophet, all alone, as we hear the story told. And so when the writer of this story says, there was the prophet, and he was on Mount Horeb, just, bing, there it goes, get ready, there's going to be a divine encounter. And then and this story should be somewhat familiar to us because it's the story about the great wind and the great fire and then the earthquake, and we're told God is not in these traumatic events, these big, flashy, dramatic things, but God is in the sheer silence. I like the translation that I learned a long time ago, the still, small voice. The reason I want to call that to our attention is because usually, God speaks to us in that still, small voice. It's in the quiet moments of our life that God is talking to us. In our experience, maybe not in a cave, very few of us go to caves, maybe see a stalactite or something, but it could be over a cup of coffee, in the morning stillness, on the patio, outside, kitchen. Could be just in a quiet moment, wherever it is. Suddenly, something comes to you. It's God speaking. Thought comes, there's an insight. Oh, that's what's going on. That's what he means. Yeah. God has a way of doing that. Even in the big dramatic events of our lives, usually that's when we expect God to be doing something. And it's usually not then. It's usually in the stillness afterwards. Usually in the stillness afterwards. Let's just leave that there for now. Let's think for a moment about this gospel lesson, because there's a pretty dramatic scene there now, isn't it? Again, Jesus goes up on the mountain to pray. Jesus was looking for a divine encounter, it seems. He's been teaching and preaching. He's a little tired, so he says, I got to go talk to my dad. Go talk to Abba, my father. So he goes up there to pray. So he goes up for a divine encounter as well. He often does that. He comes down, decides to join his tribe, his little group. He goes out, and of course, they're in the middle of the lake, and they're fighting the waves because the storm came up, kind of what came through, I guess, last night here. If you look outside, all the mulch is sort of now in the middle of the plaza out front. Apparently, there was a lot of water. Harrisburg wasn't so much, but some wind, some rain. we're in the middle of a lake, probably not a pleasant experience. You've heard me talk about this story in a different context before. I told you the story when I was in a sailboat and all that sort of thing. Well, I'm not going to repeat that one. You've already heard that one. Talk about something else. I'm talking about Peter. There's Peter. You know, we talk about Peter a lot because, you know, he's got a big mouth. I like Peter. Kind of like me. He has a tendency to talk and act without thinking too quickly. And then says, oh, how did I get myself into this? Have you ever asked yourself that question? You act, you do, you say, you go like, oh, what did I do now? How did I get myself into this? Have you ever like promised to do something for somebody and you're in the middle of doing it and suddenly you're going like, oh, this is more, you know, I bit off more than I can chew, or this is way beyond what I expected it to be, and oh my, you know, and you start to feel overwhelmed and you just want to cry out, Lord, save me. We've all been in those situations, I think, most of us at least. Well, you can identify with Peter then. You got the zeal. Jesus says, come. First of all, he said that crazy thing. Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come and walk on the water. What a crazy thing to say. That's a Peter thing. But Jesus said, all right, that's what you want, come. And he does it. And then reality hits him in the face. Maybe it was a wave. He said, the gospel writer says, some wind hit him. Well, it was probably a wet wind. And I always just start to look around and say, who am I? I'm in the middle of a lake. And suddenly, there he goes. He says, Lord, save me. And suddenly Jesus reaches out to rescue him. Now, when we cry out like that, you know, we probably expect this sort of Monty Python-esque hand to come out of the sky, to reach out to us, to reach out and pick us up out of the water. It ain't going to happen. I can guarantee you that. This isn't a film. This is not a fantasy. This is real life. You know, in the time of Jesus, it was the time of the Roman occupation. Now, many of you, I look around, are of a certain age, shall we say, that perhaps you studied Latin in high school, perhaps, maybe, or at least Western civilization. And in the Roman Empire was a formidable thing, partly because of its army. And its army was formidable because they had some military tactics that were unknown in the ancient world. They would put together a legion, and the legion would march, and it would have these formations that in common parlance it was called a turtle. You know what I'm talking about? It would be a group of soldiers, many, many soldiers, that would actually be marching in close quarters. They would be shoulder to shoulder. One soldier would put his arm on the shoulder of another soldier. That's how close they were. Can't talk that way. The shoulder of a soldier. And the other one, you had a shield. If you were on the outward rank, you would hold the shield outward like this. If you were on the inside, you simply held it like this. And on command, if there was a barrage of arrows, which was always the first foray in a battle, you were told how, there was a command given, and you either raised your shield above your head, or to the side, or to the front, whatever, wherever you were, to create a shell, a protective shell around all of the soldiers, so that almost no one was harmed by an arrow. And that was always the first barrage in ancient warfare, because it could be done from far away. It was like artillery barrages in today's warfare. It was what was supposed to soften the attacking forces, take them out before they get close. the Romans figured out how to get away from that. They formed a turtle shell around them, and they kept going. That alone would scare off many times the opposing. And other kinds of things too. That solidarity, that marching in close quarters, that strength that came from being so close together and holding on to one another was accentuated in other kinds of tactics as well. For example, when they had to hold a line. Now, let me do something. Lee, stand up for a minute. Here. This is a show and tell scene. How many of you played Red Rover when you were kids? All right? What'd you do? You're so formal. Give me your hand. That hand, the other. This is how you did it, right? And I would say, Red Rover, let John come over. And suddenly John would come and run and sort of try to break through. That was kind of easy to break through, right? Unless we had like super grip or super something on our thing. All right? Now, Roman soldiers did not form a line this way. They did it another way. They did it this way. At my elbow. You try to break through that. You can't. That strength of two arms together, joined elbow to elbow, is stable. Francis, you're the physicist around here. That is stable and strong. There's something about that. That's actually the way I was taught when I was an orderly, that's what they called them then, in a nursing home, to actually help someone out of a chair. Because there was a strength to that did not exist. I could pull somebody's arm out of their socket doing this way. You can't do it this way. This is strong. You're leveraging strength this way. This is also the way that a Roman soldier would come in and say, Salve, amici. Hello, friend. Because you're close in. And you have to look each other in the eye that way. You may remember in the Shakespeare play, Julius Caesar, the famous line, Et tu, Brute? This is the way it's supposed to be acted. Because they're this close. So the treachery is emphasized. He ran away. Got the dagger in the other hand. No. But you see, that's probably how Jesus reached out to Peter. In artwork, you get this little, Jesus reaches out to Peter and pulls him onto the ship. If you're going to rescue somebody, you don't give the weakest one, you give the strongest grip. You reach for the elbow. That's the way soldiers and sailors are taught to do it. Save me. Jesus reaches out and gives him not his hand, but his arm. When you are failing and foundering, when you are sinking and you call out, Lord, save me, Jesus doesn't give you a wimpy little hand. He reaches out and gives you his arm. Like I said, it's not some thing from the heavens. Where does it come from? Here. Why? Jesus has already told us. We are his body. We are the presence of Christ in the world. When someone calls out, Lord, save me, it is we who are to reach out. We who are to extend not just a hand, but an arm. We who are to grab not for their hand, but for their elbow and pull them onto the boat. This is called a name. This is a ship. This is a boat. We are called out to save one another and to save those out there, to pull them onto the ship when they are foundering and faltering, and they realize that wherever they are sinking, and they call out, Lord, save me. We are the ones who are called to give them that arm and not hold them far enough away that we're not vulnerable, but rather like those Roman soldiers, we pull them in close. That we become vulnerable in the process. That we ourselves look them in the eye and say, here I am. Do not worry. I've got you. I've got you. That's what Jesus is saying to Peter. I've got you. And he tells us, that's your mission. You are my body. You are my blood. You are my presence in the world. For anyone who cries out, Lord, save me. First, let us be there for one another, so that we make one another strong. Like that Roman phalanx, that we stand shoulder to shoulder, put our arms over one another, and make the turtle. And then we go out into the world, one by one, two by two, however we go, be ready to pull others in as they want to be saved. When we give peace, I know COVID, our distances, all that. But if you are comfortable today, when you give the peace to someone, if you are comfortable doing it, no. You are my friend. Peace. Save me.